Hi, I'm Daniel, founder of Pretty Litter. Did you know cats tend to hide symptoms of sickness and pain? I learned this the hard way after losing my cat, Gingy. So I created Pretty Litter, a health monitoring litter that helps detect early signs of illness by changing colors, saving you money and potentially your cat's life. Pretty Litter is veterinarian developed, and it's the easiest way to keep tabs on your fur baby's health right at home.
Go to prettylitter.com and use code SPOTIFY for 20% off your first order and a free cat toy. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.
Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Koshi's Business Builders. I'm Adam Bubb, one of the editors here, and I'm usually joined by my co-host Cess Busby. Today I'm flying solo as she's unfortunately unwell. Hopefully she's better by the time this podcast is in your ears. We shout out to you, Cess. Hope you recover very, very soon. Now, in case you've just joined us for the first time, this podcast digs deep into the origin stories of Australia's most fascinating entrepreneurs and ideas people. It's not just about business and success, though. This is about the personal trials, the tribulations, and the light bulb moments that we experience as humans trying to make a difference in this world. Now, today's guest joins our pantheon of First Act luminaries, and she puts the game into Game Changer. Jax Garrett, also known as Jax, is helping gamers make the big dollars. Based in Newcastle, New South Wales, Jax is the founder and CEO of GGWP Academy, an e-learning and influencer marketplace platform. GGWP Academy helps gamers around the world become full-time creators and connects them with sponsorship opportunities with major brands. To get here, Jax has been a leader in various industries from retail to recruitment to aviation engineering. Jax will tell us a lot more about that really soon. And she's now a member of the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network, DWEN. Welcome, Jax.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, Jax. Jax, we recently had the pleasure of hearing from you at a Koshi's Business Builders live event. So good to have you with us today.
And what a fantastic event it was. Just the networking and the storytelling, it was fantastic.
Look, you bring so many insights, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this podcast with you. We always start, not that we need to have a first act icebreaker because you and I have broken the ice already. There's no ice. No ice left to break. But we always start, just as a tradition, we always start with the first act icebreaker. So your icebreaker for today is, if you were a character in the gaming world, who would you be?
Ooh. Wow, that's a really great question. Thank you, Adam. I would
I put you on the spot.
Yeah, you have. Look, I would probably just be a random floating character in Minecraft. I like to zone out when I game. So for me, it's really just about chilling out in my own little world. It's not really, like I'm not an FPS player or anything else. I just like to chill out, make everything symmetrical, build, and just kind of zone out for a while. So that for me is the most relaxing form of gameplay. And so I would probably just be a random character just wandering around in Minecraft, to be quite honest. Sorry for the really bland answer.
You are the secret mastermind that, the unassuming mastermind who's like the architect behind it all, right? Like people don't necessarily, is that how you would describe yourself?
The mastermind behind what? GGWP?
Well, behind anything in your life, I think it could be your business, it could be your personal life. Just the mastermind, the one secretly kind of like the glue that holds things together. Yeah.
I'm always thinking big, but I always need people around me to help execute that as well. So yes, I'm probably the person who comes up with the idea, but I need other people around me to help make that, an implemented business or, actually come to fruition.
You're the architect and then you hire the builders.
Sounds good.
All right. So look, to kind of kick off, like on that note, Jax, you're an eternal optimist. What is your life motto and why should we follow it?
Oh, wow. So there's a few things that I kind of live by. One is do good business with good people. And trying to scale that and take that global can sometimes be hard. But it's definitely something that I like to live by and like to work by. The other one is the old adage of, if you don't, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So those would be the two things that I tend to live by in terms of business.
But then I guess, like, kind of like drawing back to, I mean, this podcast, we look back to, those sort of lessons that we've learned along the way, and you can kind of go trace that back to, childhood as well. So was younger Jax always this planner, this mastermind who had these sort of big ideas? Like, was that you growing up?
Not at all. Not at all. To be quite honest, if you knew me prior to my 20s, you would just not believe that what I'm doing now is what I'm doing now. It's a totally different shift from who I was in my youth, and it's been something that I've sort of grown into, and I think it's almost a result of the amount of different roles that I've had. And just now in, a bit of age and a bit of maturity, wanting to use all of those skills, all of those things that I've learned over the last, 20 years and putting them all into one role. And how do I do that for a business? Well, it's very difficult to find a role that encompasses everything you know. And so when you found your own company, you have to use everything that you know. And so this suited very well. This was very well suited to who I am and what I do now. And so I think that I've kind of grown into that more than was born into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting discussion that comes up a lot on this podcast about whether someone is born an entrepreneur or whether you can learn to be an entrepreneur. Like whether it's that life experience that you put together your different pieces of your puzzle, and that's what creates you. Like that seems to be very much the case in your case.
I think that there's some attitudes though that you're kind of born with or you grow up with that make being an entrepreneur or being a founder a lot easier. So if you're brought up to have a great deal of resilience, for instance, that is obviously very, very useful if you're going to be an entrepreneur. If you're able to overcome things very quickly, get back on your feet and try to use whatever just happened to your advantage, that kind of a mindset is something that you can't teach. It's not something that you can learn at Entrepreneurship 101 at uni. It's definitely something that you have to, cultivate yourself, or you're grown up believing, or I think that there are definitely attitudes and things within you that will make this life easier.
Now, you speak about growing up. Now, you grew up in Newcastle. You went to uni there. You still live there. What impact has that area had on who you are and who you want to be, and what kind of impact you want to make?
Yeah, so Newcastle's a funny place. It's very close to Sydney. It means that we have the access to, the Sydney network, but you don't necessarily grow up with it. So finding ways to connect within, particularly when it comes to brands or investors, finding ways to connect with those people who, may look at you and think, you're coming from a more country town or wherever, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult. It also means that you don't necessarily, in my particular instance, have the experience of working in a corporate level or a C-suite sort of a level. So, there are certain smaller gaps that I guess you have to just break through, and trying to make those connections from a more regional area can be very interesting. It's an interesting road, and I found that particularly with the fundraising side of business, that breaking through that and making a network of investors, you almost need someone to let you into the club. There are all of these gatekeepers, and you need someone to let you in and do the introductions. But once you have that, you need to make the most of it and make every, intro count towards another intro.
Does that mean making a lot of trips to Sydney or to Brisbane and that kind? Okay, yeah, because it's almost like you said, there are gaps in the market for how we can kind of better integrate, those cities that aren't the major capital cities, regional cities and regional towns and that kind of. But I mean, that's a very different thing in and of itself, because you do have an ecosystem there and you do have a support network too in the local communities.
Yes, correct. It's often smaller, but it's definitely there.
Yeah. So, look, I think let's just take it back a bit, because we'll talk about GGWP Academy and how that idea came about in a moment. I do want to just touch a little bit on your career journey to get there, because you have worked in a number of leadership roles in various industries, haven't you? And how did you tell me about that career path a little bit?
Adam, I think it all stems from me just really, really disliking school, to be honest with you. I left when I was 14. So I left school at 14. I started working in retail and admin jobs, straight away. It wasn't until I was about 21 I went to do Open Foundation at university. And I kind of did it on the down low. I didn't tell a lot of people that I was doing it. It was a bit of a secret, because at the stage when I left school at 14, I was kind of failing everything. So I thought, it's pointless telling everyone that if I'm doing Open Foundation, if it's not going to go well. But I did it and I loved it. And I was able to do, the kinds of subjects that I really wanted to do. And I was doing graphic design and sociology and, numerous other courses. And it just turns out that I was able to actually do really well in a different learning environment to high school. And so, going back to university, doing Open Foundation, I did that course over the full-time 6 months. And then I went into a Bachelor of Communications. Now, I didn't finish that degree. I ended up moving to Sydney and becoming a jewelry designer before that course was finished. So I guess I was never one to really stick to anything for too long, especially if it didn't make sense for me at the time. But I'm always one for evolving and growing. So I went into jewelry design. I moved to Sydney. I did that for a number of years. I was also playing pool for money. I was running pool comps and that was supplementing my income. I've always been, I guess, what some people might call a bit of a hustler.
You're a game player. I mean, I called you a game changer earlier, but you're a game player. Like you play the game, and you do it in a lot of different spheres.
I'm highly competitive. I love to be able to do things that other people can't do. I love to be unique. I love to do things differently. It's always been, I guess, a part of my DNA.
Look, that's the key to where this sort of, the path has sort of taken you now with GGWP. Can you pinpoint
absolutely
an aha moment when you realize, I'm not where I need to be and I need to build this thing myself?
So I founded my first company, which was in recruitment and resume building. I was doing local level recruitment here in Newcastle, but I was also building out a tech platform to help young people figure out their career paths. Fast forward a little bit, I had that company maybe 18 months, and I actually sold it to the first person I spoke to about selling it. I did that within about a week. And so at 18 months, I sold that business within a week. And I founded GGWP Academy because my son had turned, I guess you could call it pro, and started competing in gaming at age 9. So he was accepted and invited to his first World Championships when he was 9 years old. And so we traveled to the States for him to compete. Just as part of that journey, he was signed to a top-tier esports team. And as part of that process and as part of the contract, actually, he was asked to start making content because they were paying for his trip to the States, and he's a jersey with our name on it, and basically the contract stated, we need X, Y, and Z content from you. So we started doing that as part of the journey, and through 3 World Championships, I started to sort of figure out that what I was doing and what my previous experience was in marketing, communication, leadership, a whole bunch of different roles, was actually helping my son get ahead and get followers and start to liaise with brands for sponsorships and things like that. And so I started writing content that, was a bit more educational to help other people do the same thing. And from that, I was accepted to the Lead Sports Accelerator in Berlin. So that's kind of like the beginning of the story. My son turned pro, started making content on YouTube, getting a bit of a followership, and I decided that, there was a way to scale this and grow this, but also looking at the industry, it was highly fragmented. And there was a lot of opportunity in terms of just being able to streamline the processes for the people involved in that industry. And being a casual gamer, my husband's been a gamer forever as well. It was very much a part of our home life. And so it made sense to want to be in that industry and change that industry for the good.
So you're kind of a bit of like the Kris Jenner of the gaming world. Would you say?
Oh, wow.
I mean, are you happy to wear that? Are you happy to wear that mantle?
I'll wear it for you, Adam. Thank you.
Please do. Please do. Well, I mean, it's funny because Kris Jenner, I mean, comparing that.
She's an amazing woman.
Amazing woman and amazing marketer for her family. But I think that in that universe of influencers, and, she's created the most influential kind of family brand in the world. What you're doing here with gamers is kind of what she's done with that sort of influencer space. So we talk about
I should be so lucky to have that kind of success with things. So, but I think that she's done an incredible job, especially of personal branding. And I noticed that she's just recently produced a course on masterclass on personal branding as well. So it's amazing to see that, personal branding is actually one of the major things that everyone is going to need to do in the future of work. It doesn't even matter what your position is going to be. It's going to be that personal branding is definitely of the utmost importance moving forward. And that's something that we teach at GGWP as well. So yeah, highly important skill to have.
So look, the seed's been planted. You see this opportunity through your son's experience and through your own knowledge of the industry. How do you go about figuring out that something that is happening on kind of this micro level in your home is something that there can be a kind of macro business model, that you can follow? Like, how did you know that there was something really in that?
Look, I think it was just engaging with the types of people that we were engaging and seeing the research that was available to us. At that particular time, esports in particular was definitely having a bit of a global boom. And so a lot of the research that was coming out of Nielsen and Superdata, Newzoo, there was a lot of new information. And we're going back to 2018 here. In 2018, there were reports everywhere saying, how much of a boom this industry was having. So it was very clear to see that this particular industry was growing at an exceptional rate. And I think in esports at that point, we were growing at 38% year on year. While gaming is at a more steady sort of around the 10% mark, we kind of figure that we're somewhere in the middle at about 20 because we straddle both sides of the market.
So one of the things you mentioned, because you mentioned that you went to, is it the Lead or Lead Sports Accelerator with GGWP?
Yes, the Lead Sports Accelerator. Yeah, that was in Berlin, in Germany. Yeah,
and you drove about 845,000 of pre-seed investment. What does that mean to anyone who's listening? How do you tender for that amount of money, and what does it do for you?
So the Lead Sports Accelerator was for, I think, let me think about this, it was 25,000 euro at the time, and that was the first money into our business. So that allowed me to make an exceptional network in Europe for, game publishers, brands, investors, even content creators on the ground, esports players. I was able to spend 4 months there networking in a really high capacity, and that has been instrumental to making partnerships and things like that happen now. So we did that in Berlin. I did that as a solo founder, actually. And then I came back to Australia and I met my co-founders, Cassie and John. And so as part of that process and building out a team, it wasn't until the beginning of last year when we sort of started really building our network in the Australian startup ecosystem. And this is what I'm saying about, getting those introductions and then those introductions counting towards other introductions. I met one particular investor, an angel investor at the time, and he was instrumental in introducing us across the ecosystem to other investors who would eventually make up that that pre-seed round for us. So we did a 425,000 priced round in January last year, and then we did a bit of a bridging round in October last year. So combined, it comes up to just under $1 million now.
That's incredible. That really is. So to anybody who's listening, I mean, I guess kind of bringing it to that idea of these accelerators and these, things that you can apply for that you may not know about. How did you find out about it? Was it because you are in a particular niche, because there is that esports element to what you're doing?
In the particular case of the Lead Sports Accelerator, it was very heavily focused on the sports industry, so sports tech, health tech. Now I believe that they are mostly health tech and have, moved a lot of their operations to the States to focus on that. Now, we've also done a StartMate as well here in Australia, which is not a niche kind of a accelerator. It's a little bit more broad and, works with startups from all over the ecosystem. We've also done SBE Global, the springboard for female founders to get to the US and have that connection there. So if you can do as many of these kinds of activities as you're growing as possible without giving away equity, that's probably the balance that you need to strike. So being involved in these offers not only the network that you need to grow, it also offers the training that you need to grow as a person, to evolve in your own business as well. Because at some point you do need to take the time out of operationally working on the business to work on yourself so that you can kind of catch up. It's kind of like the two sides kind of edging at each other all the way up. And that's what you need to sort of balance as you grow your company as well.
Right. Well, to anybody listening, just, start Googling accelerator programs.
Absolutely. I'm a big advocate for them. I love the mentorship. I love the learning that comes from it.
Now, we're just going to take a really short commercial break. We'll be back with more from Jax Garrett in a moment. We're back with Jax Garrett from GGWP Academy. Now, Jax, I'm really interested to know, what does an average day look like for you? What are you doing at GGWP every single day? What is it, 9 to 5? Tell me.
It is never 9 to 5, especially in gaming. And especially when you've been sort of going after the global market since day one. Your calls are all over the place where we're speaking with people in the States, in Europe, everywhere. Gamers are also, nocturnal by proxy. And so the people that we're speaking to in terms of our community might be, awake at 3 a.m. So we're often not 9 to 5 and working around the clock. But yeah, it's, a typical day for me is to wake up. My son goes to school and then I sort of jump right into it, typically. And I would be, I work from home, so I work in the basement, and we've got my husband's gaming rig next to me, and my work rig as well, and basically just getting into the emails and dealing with investors and dealing with that kind of constantly always trying to push forward the GGWP message, whether it be online, whether it be with investors, whether it be with our existing investors, but also our community. It's kind of an everybody does everyone, everything kind of a job.
How many people are working for you at the moment?
So we have a team of 6 at the moment, and we have, people all over Sydney in particular. I'm in Newcastle, but the rest of my team are all in Sydney.
Now, I want to know, because you kind of touched on it a little bit before about your son and his experience. You said that, an average day he goes to school, but he's also, like you told me about him being a Pokemon champ. He's like a world Pokemon champ. How do you draw the line between encouraging a gaming genius, but also keeping them focused on school and developing relationships off screen as well?
It's the quality of the time that they spend on screen. So he was not spending 50 hours a week, playing Pokemon. He would spend an allocated amount of time with the coach. He would spend an allocated amount of time when he was practicing, and the rest of the time it was competitions or whatever. I mean, basically the rule was that as long as school is not suffering, it's not a problem. I don't mind. And so, with him, I mean, he's always been in sort of the top tier of school numbers. And so, he's always competing in soccer and other things as well. He's very well rounded. And so it's never been a problem in terms of, making that mix work.
I'm just sort of like a bit dumbfounded that there's like a person whose job out there is to be a Pokemon coach just full time.
Absolutely. It's usually one of the older players or having previously, competed before. But yes, there's a lot of information behind those games, and learning how to use that information to beat your opponents is very important.
Gosh, it's like, it just makes me think of chess and like the Queen's Gambit, the TV show, and that kind of world as well, because it can feel, if you're an outsider, it feels like it's a completely foreign landscape. And yet there are millions and millions and millions of people who this is such a major part of their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been to the World Championships 3 times, and I mean, I think it was Detective Pikachu. We actually got to record as the crowd. We actually got to record for one of the Charizard match that happens in the movie. So I guess you could say that we're uncredited crowd participants in the movie. And they had a couple of the stars show up on stage, and so there's this other world of, and it's the same for every one of these esports or games as well. There's these entire worlds and bubbles full of gamers who love what they're watching, whether it be CSGO, COD, Valorant, Overwatch, it doesn't matter. There's all these little bubbles of people, and I mean, there are 3.6 billion gamers, so that's a lot of people in the world.
Absolutely. I read a stat just, while I was researching for this podcast. Women make up about 47% of Australia's gamers, and that's one of the stats that's been going around. That number is around the 40 to 50% in other countries as well. But there's still this perception around that the average gamer is a teenage boy. How fast is that changing?
Oh, look, it's absolutely changed, but I think that we need to be really careful about the definition of a gamer as well. So when we talk about the 3.6 billion gamers, and when you talk about there being 47% female usage in gaming as well, we're talking about mums with tablets who are playing Tetris.
Yes.
Or Candy Crush.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a very loosely held kind of a definition of the word gamer.
And I did mention to you that when I met you, I was just saying, well, I do Wordle every single morning. Like I basically do it in my sleep.
You're a gamer.
So does that make me a gamer?
It does. It does make you a gamer. And so, really drilling down into that is where you get really interesting stats. So when you look at esports itself, it is more heavily male dominated than that. So if you look at esports in general, I think it's actually about the 70% male mark. And so I'd have to get you a proper stat on that, but it's much higher when it comes to competitive gaming than it is casual gaming, if that makes sense. And when you're looking at streamers, you're probably looking more towards the casual side of things. So a streamer is someone, obviously making content around their gaming to become an influencer or to create a community around what they're doing. And these are the people that we work with very, very heavily. I would say that stat is closer to the casual side of things, and it's almost 50-50 for female male.
When it comes to making that full-time career out of gaming, or I guess we've spoken a bit more specifically about esports, what challenges do women face? Are there challenges in like the sponsorship world as well? Like do women get as many sponsorships in this space?
Look, they do, and whether that's it's highly contested by some men in the industry as well. You'll see a lot of women maybe streaming and potentially utilizing more assets than their gameplay and personality, and utilizing the way that they look. And so you find that there's a bit of contention out there from some male streamers as well, concerned that this kind of a look or whatever is drawing more attention to these streamers than themselves. And so there's an interesting sort of a situation happening there for starters. Then you've got the fact that less women are in game development, and so there's less representation in games of women who are smart, who are strong, who are independent, who are, a good representational role model for women who play games as well. And then you've got, the people who work in games, and I think there's about a 20% stat around that mark of women who are actually producing the games. And so there are all of these inequalities across the entire industry that lead to less representation, less equity, I guess, in the industry. And particularly even at a CEO level, there are very, very, very few women working at that level within this industry, whether it be a game publisher, whether it be a game platform, whether it be, anyone across our industry. It's quite male dominated. And so you find that a lot of the companies across the ecosystem have had some issues in terms of that equality and not potentially doing the right thing. There's been a lot of narrative in the media about that. And so I think that we're seeing a bit of a shift at the moment, though. I think that, things are improving slightly. And we just need to keep pushing that narrative a little bit further so that it represents, closer to what we need for equality across gaming in the industry overall.
So you obviously play a really key role in that, Jax, because you're a female founder in the gaming space, and you have to kind of. Do you feel that there's a bit of that element of having to kind of fight to get a seat at the table, or do you think that the seat's there? It's just about creating more seats.
Yeah, look, I think that some of this, I was actually trying not to draw attention to the fact that I was a female founder in the beginning. But nowadays, I lean very heavily towards being a female founder in a male-dominated industry because I want other women to know that it's possible. I want it to become more normalized, and I don't want to hide who I am. There's no reason for that. It does make it, I feel, a little bit more difficult when it comes to fundraising and investment. I think that there is maybe 3% of the global VC money goes to women founders, and I would say dramatically less so in the gaming industry itself. And so this is something that, I'm fighting to change. And every time I'm successful in fundraising for our company, we're changing that stat. We're moving towards, better acceptance and more money given to female founders. And so that's something that's very, very important to me in this company.
One of the things that you're also doing is your crowdfunding, and I know that that's something that's coming up a little bit in a couple of weeks' time, right?
Absolutely.
But whenever someone listens to this, let's just say you've crowdfunded thousands and thousands of dollars, and now look, this will be how did you come to the decision you wanted you wanted a crowdfund, you want these investors and people to help fund your vision, and what can anyone listening do to help?
Look, number one, it's got to be the fact that we want something built by gamers for gamers. Everyone on the team is a gamer. We have a massive and amazing community of gamers, and so we want everyone to have a part in that and to have a bit of the pie and to grow with us. We really want to engage our community as part of this and bring on users. So I guess you could say some of it's even about user acquisition and bringing on more people to the platform, and using that as part of our marketing. But it's also, a sign of the times that we can go to market with something like a crowdfund and be able to do that. I think that's really, really cool as a concept. And so, very excited just to go down this route and see what happens. It's been done by a number of US based gaming platforms, and we're really keen to see how the Australian market opens up to it, because obviously we're looking at retail and sophisticated investors or wholesale investors. And so I guess the more sophisticated or wholesale side of things, they've had a really good education over the past 2 years around what is gaming, what is esports, and what are the amazing amounts of growth and why is it a good investment. But speaking to a retail investor, it's going to be interesting talking to gamers across Australia and asking them to support us in this. So looking forward to the next 12 weeks and getting this crowdfund underway.
So this is going to be a bit later in August. So everyone, I'll give everyone a link in a moment to your website just to keep checking back so they know where to go. But I think, look, to wrap up, I just wanted to ask Jax, what do you do for your own time? Because you've got this business that is kind of taking on a life of its own that you're putting everything into. You're obviously super passionate about it. You've got your son at school as well. Is your son an only child?
He is, yes.
He is, yeah. So you've got your son. You've got you've got your personal life. How do you carve off that space where you're not doing something all the time? How do you have that mental health Jax time?
Look, I'll be honest, I tend to work very, very heavily through winter, and then through summer, I tend to spend as much time as I can carve out at the beach. I find the stress just melts away the second my feet are in sand and in the water, and that's my alone time, that's my downtime, that's my quiet time. And so I might work on my laptop or on my phone, all the way to a particular destination, and then put the phone or the laptop away for a few hours, get out of the car, be in the sand in the ocean, and then work in the car on the way home. So it really just, that's my downtime. That's what I really love doing. And winter is always such a drab and miserable time for me because I can't just wait for summer to come back.
Yeah, look, walking, you can still walk on the beach, but it just doesn't have the same sort of get the sand between your toes and with the warm sun on you kind of thing. But Newcastle, you have some of the most beautiful beaches there, so you got a couple of months.
We're very lucky.
You got a couple of months, and we've got Jax in summer mode, and life is good.
Yes, absolutely, love it.
All right, well, Jax Garrett / Kris Jenner of the gaming world, thank you. You're gonna start using that on your website, aren't you?
Oh wow, I'm definitely gonna tweet it at her.
we need. I really want, my goal out of this is to have Kris Jenner hear this somehow and be like, who is this Australian? Let's find out. I mean, Kim Kardashian.
I should only be so lucky to be called such a thing, because I think that she, like I said, she's done an amazing job of what she's done. I mean, and so, that would just be amazing.
But it's funny because, it only just dawned on me while we're chatting then that Kim Kardashian has her own app, her own gaming app. And it's been, I don't know if people are still using it or not, but a couple of years ago it was massive. There's some crossover here. Now, look, Jax.
Amazing. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for sharing your first act with us. For anyone listening, head to ggwpacademy.com for more info, or search Jacqueline Garrett on LinkedIn to connect. Now, don't forget to give this podcast a 5-star review if you've enjoyed it. We'd love for you to. And if you need something to listen to next, try our chat with Jamie Fuller, the trailblazer who earned an estimated $50 million worth of publicity for a controversial stunt around his former activewear brand, Skins. Now, we also want to give a shout out to Cess, who we know is listening and is recovering and will be back for our next episode of First Act. Enjoy and join us next week for another insightful First Act conversation. Thank you.